Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku learned to stay calm in battle. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was loud. That was the first thing Izuku Midoriya noticed every morning when he woke up, and the last thing he acknowledged before he slept. The world was a cacophony of quirks, of sirens, of shouting heroes, of classroom chatter, and the incessant, high-pitched scratching of his own pen against paper. But mostly, the noise came from inside. It was the noise of anxiety, a turbine engine spinning in his chest, fueled by a decade of being told he was lesser. Defective. Deku. It was a Tuesday in early spring when the noise reached its crescendo. Aldera Junior High was sweltering, the windows propped open to catch a breeze that smelled faintly of exhaust and cherry blossoms. The teacher, a man whose apathy was as tangible as his cheap cologne, slapped a stack of papers against the podium. Since you're all third years, it's time for you to think seriously about your future, he droned. I would pass out these career aptitude forms, but, he smirked, tossing the papers into the air with a theatrical flair. Why bother? You all want to go into the hero course, don't you? The classroom exploded. It was a riot of minor superpowers, fingers elongating, eyes glowing, small objects levitating. It was a display of genetic lottery winners celebrating their tickets. Izuku sat perfectly still. He kept his head down, his hand trembling slightly as he gripped the edges of his desk. Don't look up. If you don't look up, you aren't part of the joke. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, waving a hand to settle them. But you know it's against the rules to use them in school. Sensei. A rough, arrogant voice cut through the cheer. Katsuki Bakugo leaned back in his chair, feet on his desk, looking at his classmates with the disdain a wolf reserves for sheep. Don't lump me in with these extras. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister. I'm the real deal. The class erupted in angry protests, but Bakugo merely laughed, small explosions popping like gunfire in his palms. Bring it on, I'll take you all on. Oh, that's right, the teacher mused, looking at his clipboard. Bakugo, you're aiming for UA High, aren't you? The silence that followed was heavy with awe. UA was the summit. The impossible fortress. That's exactly right. Bakugo jumped onto his desk, basking in the attention. I aced the mock exams. I'm the only one here with the stuff to make it. I'm going to surpass All Might and become the top hero. My name will be etched into the history books. Oh, the teacher interrupted, his voice flat. Speaking of UA, didn't Midoriya want to go there too? The world stopped. Izuku felt the air leave the room. He felt every pair of eyes snap toward him, pinning him to his chair like a specimen on a dissection tray. For a second, there was total silence. Then, the laughter hit him like a physical blow. Midoriya? No way. You can't get into the hero course just by studying. He's quirkless. What's he gonna do, bleed on the villains? They got rid of that rule. Izuku stammered, standing up, though his knees knocked together. There's no precedent, sure, but, boom. Bakugo was there in an instant, his palms slamming onto Izuku's desk with enough force to char the wood. The shockwave sent Izuku sprawling backward onto the floor. Hey, Deku! Bakugo loomed over him, smoke curling from his fingers. You're below the rejects. You're quirkless. You think you can stand in the same ring as me? No! Wait, Kaken! Izuku scrambled back, hitting the wall. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. I'm not trying to compete with you. I swear! It's been my dream since I was little. And I won't know unless I try. Try? Bakugo's eyes narrowed, red irises glowing with genuine malice. Try what? Taking the entrance exam just to fail? What can you do? You're nothing. The class watched, amused. To them, this was the natural order. The strong dominating the weak. Izuku simply curled in on himself, waiting for the bell, waiting for the noise to stop. The day didn't get better. After school, as Izuku packed his bag, he pulled out his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. It was his pride and joy, the culmination of years of observation. Bakugo snatched it from his hands before he could react. We're not done talking, Deku. Kaken, give that back! Izuku pleaded, reaching out. Bakugo inspected the cover. Hero analysis? You really are delusional. With a casual flick of his wrists, he detonated a small explosion between his palms, scorching the notebook black. Izuku let out a strangled gasp. Before he could process the destruction, Bakugo tossed the charred book out the open window. They watched it arc through the air and tumble into the koi pond below. Most top-tier heroes have stories about their school days, Bakugo said, his voice dangerously low. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, smoke rising from the fabric of Izuku's uniform. I want my biography to shine. I don't want a pebble like you tripping me up on the starting line. He leaned in close, a cruel smile stretching his face. So here's some advice. Don't apply to UA. Bakugo turned to leave, his lackeys trailing behind him. At the door, he paused. You know, if you want to be a hero that badly, there might be another way. Izuku looked up, eyes stinging with unshed tears. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray you'll be born with a quirk in the next life. The door slid shut. Izuku stood alone in the golden afternoon light. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to scream. He wanted to chase after them and throw a punch he knew would never land. He wanted to yell that he was human, that he existed, that he mattered. But he didn't. His body was frozen, locked in the paralysis of the prey animal. The fear of retaliation, the fear of pain, the fear of the truth in Bakugo's words. It was a heavy blanket that smothered his fire. Don't listen to him, Izuku thought, the mantra weak in his own mind. Just go get your book. He walked out to the koi pond. The fish were nibbling at the burned paper. That's not food, Izuku whispered, fishing the sodden notebook out of the water. Stupid fish. He hugged the wet book to his chest and began the long walk home. The underpass was cool and dark. Izuku walked with his head down, muttering to himself, trying to reconstruct the damaged pages in his mind. It was a coping mechanism, analyzing data processing. If he filled his brain with facts, there was no room for feelings. A medium-sized body, maybe a gigantification quirk, or an emitter type. He didn't hear the manhole cover slide open. He didn't hear the wet, slithering sound of fluid mechanics gone wrong. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A gurgling voice rasped. Izuku spun around. A wall of green sludge rose up before him. Eyes, manic yellow, rolling wildly, floated in the muck. Perfect, the villain hissed. A hiding spot. Before Izuku could scream, the sludge lunged. It wasn't a solid impact. It was an engulfing. Cold, viscous fluid shot down his throat, into his nose, filling his ears. He couldn't breathe. I'm dying. The thought was clinical, detached. Izuku clawed at the liquid, but his fingers passed through it like water. The villain was forcing himself inside, taking over. Don't struggle, kid. It'll only hurt for a minute. Thanks for the help, you're a real lifesaver. Panic set in. Pure, unadulterated terror. His vision began to spot with white light. His lungs burned as if they were filled with acid. He scratched at the slime, his fingernails finding no purchase. Someone help. Anyone. No one is coming. I'm going to die here. Without ever doing anything. Without ever showing them. His strength faded. His arms went limp. The darkness of the tunnel seemed to expand, swallowing the edges of his vision. Is this it? Is this what I amount to? And then, a crash. The manhole cover flew into the ceiling with the force of a cannonball. Do not fear! The voice was a sonic boom. It vibrated in Izuku's bones, shaking him even as he drowned. For I am here. Through the blurring slime, Izuku saw a figure. Blonde hair. Muscle. A smile that defied the darkness. All Might. The villain shrieked, lashing out with tendrils of slime. All Might ducked under the attack with impossible speed. Texas. Smash! The punch didn't even hit the villain directly. The wind pressure alone was a hurricane. The sludge was blown apart, scattered against the tunnel walls by the sheer force of air displacement. Izuku was free. He gasped, sucking in air that tasted like concrete dust and salvation, before consciousness slipped away. When he woke up, he was being slapped. Gently. Hey! Hey! Izuku's eyes snapped open. A massive face loomed over him. Oh good! All Might stood up, his signature laugh booming. I thought we lost you there. Sorry about that, I got a little carried away fighting this guy. But I captured him safely. He held up 2 soda bottles filled with the angry green sludge. Izuku scrambled backward, his brain short-circuiting. All Might. You're real. You're here. Indeed I am. And I must be going. Justice never sleeps. Wait. Izuku scrambled up. He needed to ask. He had to know. The question that had been burning a hole in his soul since he was 4 years old. Can I ask you something? All Might was already crouching, preparing to jump. No time, Fanba. Check your notebook. Izuku opened the damp book. A massive signature sprawled across 2 pages. He screamed in delight. See you on the flip side. All Might launched himself into the air. Without thinking, driven by a desperation that overrode all logic, Izuku grabbed onto the hero's leg. What followed was a terrifying ascent, a struggle against wind resistance, and an awkward landing on a rooftop. But none of that mattered. Only the answer mattered. However, the answer was delayed by a horrifying revelation. Steam erupted from All Might's body. The muscle vanished. In his place stood a skeletal, gaunt man who looked more like a ghost than a hero. After the shock, after the explanation of the injury, the respiratory system destroyed, the time limit. Izuku finally asked. He stood on that rooftop, the wind whipping his hair, his heart laid bare. Can I, even without a quirk, can I be a hero like you? The silence stretched. It was agonizing. The skeletal man looked at him, eyes shadowed and heavy with a reality Izuku wasn't ready for. Pros are constantly risking their lives, All Might said softly. I cannot simply say, you can do it even without power. The words hit Izuku harder than the sludge villain had. Harder than Bakugo's explosions. It was a precision strike to the core of his being. If you want to help people, you could become a police officer. They get a lot of flack, but it's a fine profession. All Might turned to the door leading to the stairs. It's not bad to dream, young man. But you also have to consider the reality. The door clicked shut. Izuku was left alone on the roof. Consider the reality. The walk home was a blur. Izuku didn't cry. He felt too hollow to cry. It was as if his insides had been scooped out, leaving only a fragile shell. He was right, Izuku thought. Of course he was right. He's the #1 hero. He sees the world clearly. I've just been hallucinating. He walked aimlessly, his feet carrying him not home, but toward the sound of sirens. It was a habit he couldn't break. Even with his dreams shattered, the analyst in him craved the data. Smoke billowed into the sky from the shopping district. A villain attack? I shouldn't go. There's no point. But he went anyway. He reached the crowd and pushed his way to the front. The heat was intense. Fires raged in the street, consuming shops and cars. The heroes were there, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, but they were standing back. Why aren't they doing anything? A bystander asked. They can't get close. The villain has a hostage. Izuku looked. In the center of the inferno, the sludge villain had reformed. And he had someone. Izuku squinted against the glare of the fire. The hostage was thrashing, setting off explosions that only fueled the flames. Blonde hair. A snarl of defiance. Kaken. Izuku's breath hitched. It's my fault. The bottle fell out of All Might's pocket when I grabbed him. I did this. He looked at the heroes. My quirk is no good against this heat. I need a clear shot. We have to wait for someone with a suitable quirk. They're waiting, Izuku realized. They're just watching him die. He looked at Bakugo. Their eyes met. Usually, Bakugo looked at him with arrogance. Anger. Disgust. But right now, surrounded by fire and suffocating slime, Bakugo's eyes were wide. They were pleading. They were terrified. Fear. Something snapped in Izuku's brain. Normally, this was the part where he would panic. His mind would flood with what-ifs. What if I get hurt? What if I get in the way? What if I die? But today, Izuku had already died. He had died in that tunnel. He had died on that rooftop when All Might killed his dream. The boy standing there had nothing left to lose. And in that vacuum where his anxiety used to be, something else clicked into place. A cold, hard clarity. Fear is a variable, his mind whispered. Panic increases the probability of failure by 80%. If I panic, he dies. The noise of the crowd faded. The roar of the fire became background static. Izuku's vision tunneled. The world turned into a grid of vectors, physics, and weak points. He didn't scream. He didn't yell Kaken, he just moved. Izuku ducked under the police tape. His sprint wasn't the flailing dash of a desperate child. It was a low, grounded run. Hey! You idiot! Stop! Death Arms shouted. Izuku didn't hear him. He was running a simulation in his head. Target, sludge villain. Liquid body. Immune to blunt force. Weakness, the eyes. The only solid organs necessary for sight. Obstacle, fire. Path of least resistance. The center lane where the explosions cleared the debris. Weapon. Izuku reached back and swung his heavy yellow backpack off his shoulder. He didn't just throw it. He gripped the strap, spun his body to generate torque, and released it at the apex of the rotation. The bag flew like a missile. The villain, distracted by Bakugo's explosions, saw the projectile too late. The heavy bag, filled with textbooks, slammed directly into the villain's left eye. Arg! The villain recoiled, his liquid form wavering. The grip on Bakugo's mouth loosened for a fraction of a second. Bakugo gasped for air. Izuku slid to a halt in front of the sludge. He didn't stop to check on Bakugo. He didn't offer comfort. He lunged forward, his hands forming claws. Don't pull the hostage. You'll dislocate his neck. Disperse the medium. Izuku dug his hands into the sludge near Bakugo's face. Instead of pulling Bakugo out, Izuku tore the sludge away. He ripped at the semi-solid fluid, throwing handfuls of it aside with mechanical efficiency. Deku? Bakugo wheezed, his voice trembling. What the hell? You're losing oxygen, Izuku said. His voice was terrifyingly calm amidst the roaring fire. It wasn't the voice of a hero. It was the voice of a surgeon deep in a cavity. Stop exploding. You're consuming the air. Get off me! The villain recovered, his eye red and weeping. He raised a massive tentacle of sludge. You little gnat! Izuku looked up. He calculated the trajectory. The tentacle was coming down. He couldn't dodge it, not with Bakugo stuck. Impact in 0.8 seconds. Survival probability, low. He didn't flinch. He didn't close his eyes. He merely braced his legs, ready to shield Bakugo with his own frail body, staring death in the face with an expression of utter, empty calm. If I die, at least I wasn't afraid. The wind pressure hit before the blow did. I really am pathetic. Blood sprayed from All Might's mouth as he appeared between the boys and the villain, catching the sludge tentacle with one hand. Steam poured off him, but he held his muscle form through sheer willpower. I told you traits to make a hero, but I wasn't living up to them myself. All Might cocked back his other fist. Izuku saw the air distort around it. Detroit. Smash! The punch changed the weather. The upward draft created a localized storm. Clouds swirled. Rain began to fall, dousing the fires instantly. The villain was scattered to the four winds. Izuku was blown back, tumbling across the pavement, but he rolled with the fall, coming to a stop in a crouch. He looked up. The crowd was silent. The rain fell on his face, cooling the burns he hadn't realized he had. The aftermath was a study in contrast. The heroes scolded Izuku. You were reckless! Kamui shouted. You could have gotten yourself killed. That was suicide. You have no quirk. You were a liability. Death Arms added. Izuku stood there, head bowed, listening. But he wasn't really listening. He was analyzing them. Kamui Woods, weak to fire, yet stood paralyzed instead of running rescue support. Death Arms, strength quirk, capable of lifting debris, yet waited for a better matchup. They let fear of the unknown dictate their actions. I didn't. On the other side, the heroes were praising Bakugo. That quirk is amazing. You held out so long. You're a natural. Izuku watched Bakugo. The blonde boy wasn't preening. He wasn't yelling. He was staring at the ground, his shoulders shaking slightly. He looked up, catching Izuku's gaze. For a moment, the connection held. Then Bakugo looked away, scowling. Eventually, they were released. Izuku walked home under the setting sun. The adrenaline had faded, leaving him exhausted, but his mind was still humming, vibrating on a new frequency. Deku! Izuku turned. Bakugo ran up behind him, panting. I didn't ask for your help. Bakugo yelled, his voice cracking. I didn't need you to save me. I was fine. Don't look at me like that, Izuku blinked. Like what? Like you're pitying me. Like you're analyzing me. Just stop it. Bakugo turned and stomped away. You're still a quirkless nobody. Don't forget it. Izuku watched him go. His respiration rate is still elevated. He's masking terror with aggression. Standard defense mechanism. I am here. All Might burst around the corner, sliding to a stop in a dramatic pose. Aol Berg. He dissolved into a coughing fit, reverting to his skeletal form. All Might? Izuku asked, not jumping in surprise this time. Should you be running? Your injury. I'm fine, the hero wheezed, wiping blood from his chin. Young man. I came to correct what I said earlier. And to suggest something. Izuku stood straight. Suggest something? All Might looked at the boy. He had watched the footage from the news helicopter on his phone. He had seen the way the boy moved. Top heroes have stories about their school days. All Might began, echoing Bakugo's words from earlier, though he didn't know it. Most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku looked at his hands. It wasn't. I didn't just move without thinking. All Might paused. Oh, I thought about everything, Izuku said quietly. I saw the fire. I saw the villain. I saw the heroes doing nothing. And I realized that if I stopped to be scared, Kaken would die. So I decided not to be scared. All Might stared at him. This was different. Usually, heroic instincts were described as a hot rush of passion. This boy was describing a cold dissociation for the sake of efficiency. It was unsettling, but it was also effective. Today, All Might said, stepping closer. In a scene where professional heroes stood by and watched, you were the only one who acted. You, the timid, quirkless boy. All Might clenched his fist over his heart. You spurred me to act. You saved that boy. And you saved me from my own hypocrisy. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of rain. Izuku Midoriya. You can be a hero. Izuku's knees hit the pavement. He didn't sob. He didn't wail. Tears fell silently from his eyes, hitting the asphalt. He had waited his whole life to hear those words. But All Might continued, I have a proposal. A secret. My quirk. I can pass it on. Izuku's head snapped up. What? It is a power cultivation quirk. One for all. And I deem you worthy to inherit it. The next 10 months were hell. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a graveyard of garbage. Tires, refrigerators, broken cars. It was a monument to apathy. This is your first step. All Might declared, standing atop a pile of trash in his muscle form for the aesthetic. You must clear this entire beach to prepare your vessel. If you receive my power now, your limbs would shoot off and you'd explode. Understood, Izuku said. He pulled out a notebook. Not a hero analysis book. A new one. Project Vessel. I've designed a regimen, All Might said, handing over a sheet of paper. It's called the Aim to Pass, American Dream Plan. Izuku scanned it. This covers nutrition and lifting. But it lacks a psychological component. All Might blinked. Psychological? Fear, Izuku said, looking at the mountain of trash. Hesitation caused by stress. During the sludge incident, I entered a state of hyperfocus. But I can't rely on trauma to trigger it. I need to control it. He looked at All Might. If I am to carry the strongest power in the world, I cannot panic. A panic punch at 100% power would kill someone. I need to be the eye of the storm. All Might smiled, a genuine, small smile on his skeletal face. You put a lot of thought into this. Very well. What do you propose? Meditation, Izuku said. And breathing control. While I lift, I will practice lowering my heart rate. I want to be able to disconnect my emotional response from my physical action. And so, the training began. Spring turned to summer. Summer burned into autumn. Izuku hauled tires through the sand. He dragged safes with ropes around his chest. His muscles tore and rebuilt, denser and stronger. He ate the horrific diet plans All Might cooked for him, but the real change happened in the quiet moments. While balancing on a pile of unstable scrap metal, holding a microwave over his head, Izuku would close his eyes. His arms would shake. The pain would scream at him to drop it. The fear of falling would creep up his spine. Inhale, 4 seconds. Hold 4 seconds. Exhale, 4 seconds. He visualized the fear as a red light, and he visualized himself flipping a switch. The red light turned off. The pain became just data. Lactic acid buildup in deltoids. Adjust grip. Shift center of gravity. Young Midoriya. All Might called out one afternoon. You've been holding that pose for 10 minutes. Are you okay? Izuku opened his eyes. They were clear. Eerily still. I am optimizing my stamina. I can continue. All Might shivered slightly. He's getting stronger quickly. But sometimes, it's like looking at a machine. Winter came. The beach began to clear. The horizon became visible. On the final day, the morning of the entrance exam, the sun rose over a pristine beach. Not a single wrapper remained. At the center of the clean sand stood a pyramid of garbage, the heaviest items, stacked perfectly by a boy who understood physics as well as he understood sweat. Izuku sat on top of the pile, shirtless, steam rising from his skin in the cold morning air. He was screaming, "Aya-aya-aya!" All Might drove up in his truck. Holy stinking super crap! You finished it! You even cleaned outside the designated area. Izuku slid down the pile. He landed softly. His body was chiseled, lean muscle tightly coiled. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright. I'm ready, All Might. You certainly are. All Might plucked a hair from his head. Now. Eat this. Izuku stared at the hair. He didn't recoil. He didn't question the logic. He took it. DNA transfer. Oral ingestion is the fastest route. He swallowed it dry. Gross, he stated flatly. Now, off to the exam. You might not feel the power yet, but it will be there when you need it. Clench your buttocks and yell smash within your heart. The gates of UA High were towering. Hundreds of students streamed in. Some were nervous, chatting loudly. Some were arrogant. Izuku walked among them. He wore his middle school uniform, but it fit differently now. His shoulders were broader. His stride was measured. He saw Bakugo ahead. The blonde turned, sneering. Out of my way, Deku. In the past, Izuku would have flinched. He would have stuttered an apology. Today, Izuku simply sidestepped. He didn't stop walking. He didn't make eye contact. He just adjusted his vector to avoid the collision and kept moving toward the door. Bakugo stood frozen, confused. He ignored me? Izuku looked at the massive building. The noise of the crowd washed over him. The anxiety tried to rise, the old fear, the imposter syndrome. You don't belong here. You're just a faker with a borrowed quirk. Izuku stopped. He closed his eyes. Inhale, exhale. The noise vanished. The fear was filed away in a cabinet marked irrelevant. When he opened his eyes, they were focused. Green pools of absolute calm. He took a step. His foot caught on the pavement. He tripped. Gravity. Forward momentum. Impact imminent. He didn't flail. He prepared to roll. Suddenly, he stopped in midair. He was floating. Are you okay? A cheerful voice. Izuku looked up. A girl with brown hair and rosy cheeks had touched his shoulder. It's my quirk. Sorry I used it without asking, but it's bad luck to fall on exam day. She released him, and he landed gracefully. Thank you, Izuku said. His voice was level. That was an efficient use of gravity manipulation. Good luck. He walked away. Uraraka blinked, staring at his back. Wow. He was intense. Izuku walked into the orientation hall. He took his seat. He pulled out a notebook and a pen. The lights dimmed. President Mike appeared on stage. Everybody say hey, the crowd roared. Izuku sat silently, pen poised. The test was about to begin. And for the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya wasn't afraid of the fight. He was analyzing it. The written exam was quiet. For most students, silence was a vacuum that invited anxiety. In the vast, tiered lecture hall of UA High, the air was thick with the scratching of pencils and the nervous tapping of feet. To Izuku Midoriya, however, the silence was a canvas. He sat in row 4, seat 12. His posture was perfect, spine aligned, feet flat, non-dominant hand resting on the desk to stabilize his paper. He didn't rush. He didn't glance at the clock. Question 14. Analyze the impact of the Quirk Regulation Acts of 2XXX on collateral damage insurance rates. In the past, Izuku would have sweated over this. He would have second-guessed his memory, wondering if he was interpreting the question correctly. But the Izuku who sat here today was not the same boy who had been bullied into a trembling mess for a decade. He had spent 10 months rebuilding his body and rewiring his mind. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Inhale. Oxygenate the blood. Lower cortisol levels. The answer appeared in his mind, pulled from a file in his memory labeled Hero Law Economics. He wrote the answer with fluid, efficient strokes. To his right, Katsuki Bakugo was scribbling furiously, his graphite tip nearly snapping with every word. Bakugo's leg bounced up and down like a piston. He was radiating intensity, a furnace of ambition. To his left, a boy with glasses and engines in his calves, Tenya Ida, from the prestigious Somei Junior High, was answering with robot-like precision, though a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Izuku finished the exam with 10 minutes to spare. He didn't look around. He didn't reread his answers obsessively. He placed his pencil down, folded his hands, and began a breathing exercise, lowering his heart rate to 55 beats per minute. He was conserving energy. The real test was yet to come. The bus ride to Battle Center B was a study in tension. The vehicle was packed with examinees, all changing into their tracksuits or light armor. The air smelled of synthetic fabric and nervous sweat. Izuku sat near the back, staring at his hands. Somewhere deep inside him, coiled around the very marrow of his bones, was it. One for all. It didn't feel like a superpower yet. It felt like a volatile chemical stored in a glass jar. All Might had warned him. Your body is a vessel. If you try to draw 100% of the water through a straw that isn't ready, the straw bursts. He clenched his fist. He couldn't use it. Not yet. If he activated One for All, he calculated a 95% probability of shattering whatever limb he channeled it through. A broken arm meant combat ineffectiveness. Combat ineffectiveness meant 0 points. Strategy, Izuku thought, his eyes unfocused. Treat the exam as a quirkless engagement. Use the environment. Use leverage. Target mechanical weak points. Only use the power as a catastrophic last resort. Excuse me, the voice cut through his meditation. Izuku looked up slowly. It was the boy with the glasses. Ida. He was looming over Izuku, hand chopping the air. You have been muttering under your breath for the last 5 minutes, Ida stated, his voice stern. It is distracting to the other applicants, who are trying to focus. If you are here to treat this as a field trip, I suggest you leave immediately. The bus went quiet. All eyes turned to Izuku. Usually, this was the part where Deku would wave his hands, turn red, and stammer an apology. Instead, Izuku looked at Ida's calves. Reciprocating engines. Intake manifolds visible. High torque, likely limited turning radius at high speeds. Izuku met Ida's eyes. His expression was flat, his green eyes uncomfortably intense. I wasn't muttering, Izuku said softly. I was vocalizing a tactical assessment of the urban terrain we are about to enter. If my preparation is disrupting your focus, perhaps your concentration is too fragile for a combat zone. Ida froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He adjusted his glasses, taken aback. Fragile? Furthermore, Izuku continued, turning his gaze back to his hands, wasting energy on social policing before an operation is inefficient. You should conserve your breath. The silence on the bus changed flavor. It went from awkward to stunned. Even Bakugo, sitting a few rows up, glanced back with a scowl that was half anger, half confusion. The nerd talked back? And he didn't even sound scared? The bus hissed to a halt. The doors opened. We're here, Izuku whispered. Battle Center B was a replica city, a sprawling complex of concrete and steel. It was imposing, designed to make middle schoolers feel small. A crowd of students gathered before the massive gates. The tension was palpable. Everyone was stretching, psyching themselves up. Izuku stood near the front, his arms hanging loose at his sides. He wore a simple green tracksuit. No armor. No support gear. Just him. Up on a tower, President Mick's voice blasted through the speakers. Welcome to the live fire exercise. Are you ready? Silence. Tough crowd. Alright, listen up. 3 types of faux villains. Earn points by disabling them. Izuku scanned the skyline of the fake city. He was looking for choke points. High ground. Scraps of metal he could use as levers. And begin. The crowd hesitated. They were waiting for a countdown. A buzzer. A starting gun. It was a conditioning from years of structured schooling. Izuku Midoriya did not wait. The moment the word begin left President Mick's lips, Izuku exploded into motion. He didn't run with the frantic energy of a child. He ran with the aggressive, forward-leaning posture of a sprinter leaving the blocks. What's wrong? President Mike yelled. There are no countdowns in real battles. Follow that kid. He's the only one who gets it. The other students scrambled, panic setting in as they realized they were already behind. But Izuku was already gone. He had vanished into the concrete labyrinth. Target 1 1-pointer. Class Speed Type. Weakness, single wheel axis, exposed optical sensors. Izuku rounded a corner and came face to face with his first enemy. The robot was sleek, moving on a single large wheel. It locked onto him, its red eye flashing. Target acquired. It lunged. Izuku didn't brace for impact. He didn't try to punch it. He breathed out. Velocity equals 40 kilometers per hour. Mass equals approximate 200 kilograms. As the robot rushed him, Izuku slid. He dropped to his knees, the friction burning through his tracksuit pants, and slid directly under the robot's extended grasping arm. As he passed underneath, he saw it, the hydraulic line connecting the wheel chassis to the torso. Izuku reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick metal pen, the same one he used for the written exam. It wasn't a weapon, but it was a solid object. With surgical precision, he jammed the metal cylinder into the exposed joint where the gears meshed. Crunch! The gears ground against the obstruction. The wheel locked up instantly. Momentum did the rest. The robot, moving at full speed with a locked base, flipped forward. Its heavy torso slammed into the pavement with a sickening crunch of metal. Sparks flew. The red eye flickered and died. 1 point. Izuku rolled to his feet, checking his hands. Uninjured. Inefficient weapon, he noted. I need something with more leverage. He grabbed a loose length of rebar protruding from a damaged building facade. It was rusted, about 3 feet long. Better. He took off running again. Observation room. In a dark room lined with monitors, the faculty of UA watched. This year's batch shows promise, Midnight noted, licking her lips. There's a lot of destructive power. On one screen, Bakugo was flying through the air, blasting robots to scrap with manic laughter. On another, Ida was using his engines to kick through metal plating. Destruction is easy, Snipe drawled. Situational awareness is harder. Look at screen 7, Aizawa spoke up. His voice was tired, but his eyes were sharp. The teachers looked. On screen 7, a green-haired boy was dismantling a 3-pointer. He wasn't using a quirk. He had lured the massive robot into a narrow alleyway where it couldn't turn. As the robot tried to back out, the boy dropped from a fire escape, driving a steel pipe into the intake fan on the robot's neck. The robot shuddered and overheated, shutting down. No quirk registry, Nizu, the principal said, tapping a tablet. Midoriya Izuku. Quirkless. Quirkless? All Might, standing in the back in his buff form though shrinking slightly, leaned in. He knew the truth, of course, but he had to play along. He's not fighting like a hero, Vlad King grunted. He's fighting like a guerrilla soldier. He's targeting hydraulics, sensors, and power couplings. He's dissecting them. He has 28 points, Aizawa noted. All without using a single flash of power. His heart rate is surprisingly low. He's not panicking. Interested, Nizu smiled. But how will he react when the odds become impossible? Battle Center B 14 minutes remaining. Izuku was covered in dust. His knuckles were bleeding where the skin had scraped against concrete. He was breathing hard, but it was a controlled rhythm. Into 3, out to 3. He swung the rebar, smashing the optical sensor of a two-pointer. The robot blinded, flailed wildly. Izuku stepped inside its guard and kicked the emergency release lever on its back panel, a design flaw he had noticed on the first robot he analyzed. The machine hissed and collapsed. 42 points. Is it enough? The thought was a cold intruding variable. UA's acceptance rate was less than 1%. The cutoff was usually high. I need more. I can't rely on the safety of 40. I need 60. He turned a corner and saw a group of students struggling. A laser-firing robot had them pinned. Izuku didn't charge in. He looked up. A water tower sat on the roof of the adjacent building. The supports were rusted. Force required to compromise structural integrity, minimal. Izuku scrambled up the drain pipe. He reached the roof, hooked his rebar behind the rusted bolt of the front support leg, and pulled with everything he had. Physics is the ultimate quirk. The bolt snapped. The leg buckled. The water tower groaned and tipped forward, crashing down onto the street below. It didn't hit the students. It didn't hit the robot directly. It smashed into the ground behind the robot, rupturing. Thousands of gallons of water surged forward, washing the robot off its feet and shorting out its electrical systems. The students looked up, wet and confused. Izuku was already moving to the next block. 55 points. 5 minutes remaining. Izuku's muscles were burning. The lactic acid was building up. He ignored it. Pain was just a signal. Fatigue was just a chemical state. Then, the ground shook. It wasn't a vibration. It was an earthquake. Izuku stopped. He felt the tremors in the soles of his shoes. Dust fell from the buildings around him. Warning! Warning! From the center of the city, a shadow rose. It eclipsed the sun. The zero-pointer. It was a monstrosity. A moving fortress of green metal that towered over the skyscrapers. Its hand, the size of a bus, smashed into a building, sending debris raining down like meteors. The psychological effect was instantaneous. Run! It's huge! We can't fight that. The other examinees broke. The cohesion, the competition, it all evaporated, replaced by primal fear. They turned and fled, a stampede of terrified children. Izuku stood still. He looked at the robot. Height, approximate 60 meters. Mass, indeterminate, likely tens of thousands of tons. Threat level, catastrophic. Action, retreat. It was the logical choice. The zero-pointer was worth 0 points. Engaging it was a waste of resources and a risk to life. Izuku turned to run. His foot pivoted. I'll help. The sound was faint, buried under the roar of collapsing concrete and screaming sirens. But Izuku's mind, hyper-tuned to the environment, picked it up. He stopped. He looked back. In the middle of the street, trapped under a slab of concrete, was the girl. The one with the gravity quirk. The one who had saved him from falling. She was struggling, her face pale, dust coating her hair. The zero-pointer was advancing. Its massive treads were grinding the pavement to powder. It was maybe 30 seconds away from crushing her. Izuku's brain froze for a microsecond. Variable added, civilian casualty imminent. Options, 1. Run. Survival probability, 100%. Civilian survival, 0%. 2. Attempt rescue. The calm that Izuku had cultivated for 10 months wasn't about lack of emotion. It was about clarity. It was about seeing the world as a series of problems to be solved. And looking at that girl, Izuku realized that letting her die was not an acceptable solution. All Might's voice echoed in his head. Meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. Izuku dropped his rebar. It clattered to the ground. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. His face went blank, his eyes dilating as he shifted his focus from self-preservation to target elimination. He turned back toward the monster. Target head unit. Processor core. Distance, 60 meters vertical. Method, one for all. He started to run. Not away, but toward it. Hey! Kid! What are you doing? A student yelled as Izuku sprinted past him into the dust cloud. Izuku didn't hear him. He was calculating the jump. He reached a pile of debris. He didn't slow down. He used the slope as a ramp. Output regulation failed. Limiter removal required. Izuku channeled the power. He felt it ignite in his legs, a burning, white-hot supernova of energy that had been dormant since the beach, one for all. He whispered. He jumped. The concrete beneath him didn't just crack, it vaporized. A crater formed where he had stepped. Izuku shot into the air like a surface-to-air missile. The wind whipped at his face, tearing the skin back. The G-force pressed his organs against his spine. He soared past the first floor. The 10th. The 20th. He was flying, legs compromised, his brain noted clinically. He couldn't feel his legs below the knees. The bones were likely microfractured from the takeoff alone. Irrelevant. Maintain trajectory. He reached the apex of his jump. He was face to face with the zero-pointer. The robot's massive sensors focused on the tiny green speck floating in front of it. Izuku clenched his right fist. He visualized the egg in the microwave. He visualized not letting it explode. Impossible, he realized. To move this mass, I need 100%. The egg has to explode. He accepted the damage. He accepted the pain that was about to come. He pulled his arm back. The red veins of One for All glowed through his tracksuit sleeve, tearing the fabric. The air around his fist distorted, crackling with yellow lightning. He didn't scream smash. He didn't yell Detroit. He simply looked at the machine, exhaled sharply through his nose, and punched. Impact. There was no sound at first. Just a vacuum. The air was punched out of existence. Then, the shockwave hit. The robot's head didn't just dent, it caved in. The metal buckled, folded, and was blasted backward as if hit by a freight train. The force traveled down the robot's neck, shattering the internal mechanisms. The massive machine was lifted, physically lifted, off the ground by the sheer kinetic energy. Boom! The sound finally caught up. A sonic boom shattered windows in a 3-mile radius. The zero-pointer tipped backward, crashing into the buildings behind it in a cloud of dust and fire. Izuku hung in the air for a moment, suspended in the afterglow of destruction. Then, gravity reclaimed him. He began to fall. Status report. Right arm, comminuted fracture. Complex. No motor control. Pain levels critical. Legs fractured. Unusable for landing. Current altitude, 50 meters. Terminal velocity in 3 seconds. Izuku stared at the ground rushing up to meet him. The pain was blinding. It was a white noise that threatened to drown out his thoughts. Panic is death, he reminded himself. Think. Solve. He couldn't land. If he hit the ground, he would die. He looked at his left arm. It was uninjured. 1 shot. I have 1 shot. He needed to create an updraft. A cushion of air to decelerate his descent. Uraraka! He tried to yell, but his voice was a rasp. He saw the girl. She was floating on a piece of debris, trying to reach him. She slapped him in midair. Release! Izuku stopped falling. He hung suspended a few feet off the ground. The girl, Uraraka, collapsed, retching rainbows. Izuku fell the last 3 feet. He hit the pavement hard, but not fatally. He lay there on his back, staring at the artificial sky. His right arm was twisted at a grotesque angle. His legs were purple and swollen. The pain was absolute. It felt like his limbs were being dipped in magma, but Izuku didn't scream. He stared at the clouds, his chest heaving. Subject neutralized. Civilian safe. Survival confirmed. His vision began to blur. Black spots danced in his eyes. Other students were gathering around, staring in horror and awe. Did you see that? He took out the zero-pointer. Look at his arm. Izuku tried to move. He couldn't. 1 point. He mumbled, delirious. I need just 1 more point. He tried to crawl, digging his chin into the concrete to drag his broken body forward. He had to pass. He had to be a hero. Stop moving, Sonny. A small, elderly woman was walking through the crowd. Recovery girl. Oh dear, she said, looking at him. You really overdid it. She knelt beside him. Is he gonna be okay? Someone asked. Izuku looked at Recovery girl. His eyes were glazing over, but he held her gaze. Did I? He wheezed. Did I maintain calm? Recovery girl paused. She had seen students cry, scream, and pass out from shock. She had never seen a student with 3 shattered limbs ask about their composure. Yes, she said softly. You were very calm. Izuku closed his eyes. Good. The darkness took him. 1 week later, the apartment was quiet. Inko Midoriya was pacing in the kitchen, her anxiety palpable. Izuku sat at the dining table. His right arm was in a heavy cast. His legs were bandaged. Recovery Girl had healed him enough to walk, but the bone density needed time to recover naturally. She had scolded him for an hour, telling him that relying on adrenaline suppression was dangerous because it masked the body's natural limits. She's right, Izuku thought, staring at a fish swimming in the small tank on the counter. I bypassed the safety overrides. I need to calculate the percentage I can handle without breaking. 5%? Maybe less. The mailbox clattered. It's here! Inko shrieked. She brought the envelope. It was heavy. Yui insignia. Izuku took it. Mom, I'll open it in my room. He walked into his room, a shrine to All Might, though now it felt different. It felt like a workspace. He sat at his desk. He placed the envelope down. Probability of acceptance based on villain points alone, low to 0. I had 55 points. Usually, the cutoff is higher. He opened the envelope. A metal disc slid out. A hologram projected onto the wall. I am here as a projection. All Might appeared, wearing a yellow suit that clashed with the background. All Might? Izuku whispered. Young Midoriya. You've been waiting. Sorry for the delay. I have paperwork. It's terrible. The hologram shifted. All Might stopped posing and looked into the camera. You passed the written exam with flying colors. A perfect score. You have a brilliant mind, my boy. Izuku nodded. Expected. But the practical, you scored 55 villain points. A respectable number. But perhaps not enough to guarantee a spot in Class 1A. Izuku's heart sank. He kept his face still, but his stomach turned over. However, All Might leaned in. Do you think a hero course would reject someone who saves others? The video changed. It showed a clip of Uraraka standing in the faculty office. He saved me. She was pleading with President Mike. Please, can you give him my points? He risked everything. Izuku watched, stunned. Quirks are not just for violence. All Might's voice boomed. They are for saving hearts. And your actions spurred others to act. A scoreboard appeared. Izuku Midoriya. Villain points 55. Rescue points 60. Total 115 points. Rescue points. Given by a panel of judges. You suppress your fear to protect another. That is the essence of a hero. All Might extended a hand toward the camera. Izuku Midoriya. You scored the highest in the exam. The words hung in the air. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the dark room. He didn't cry. He didn't scream in joy. He looked at his cast. He looked at the scars forming on his hand. He opened his notebook to a fresh page. Subject, 1 for all control. Objective, full cowling. Status, accepted. A single tear leaked from his left eye, sliding down his cheek. He wiped it away with his good hand. Calculated, he whispered. And then, for the first time in a week, he smiled. It wasn't a hero's smile yet. But it was a start. The door to Class 1A was immense. It stood nearly 4 meters tall, a slab of reinforced steel painted with bold red letters. To the average student, it was an architectural intimidation tactic, a reminder that UA High was a place for giants. Izuku Midoriya stood before it, his backpack strap gripped tightly in his left hand. His right arm was in a sling, the cast from the entrance exam having been replaced by a lighter brace, though the bone deep inside was still knitting together. Door dimensions suggest accommodations for heteromorphic quirks of significant size, Izuku noted silently. It implies inclusivity, but also sets a psychological baseline. You are small. The world of pros is big. He checked his watch. 8:15 a.m. 15 minutes early. Arriving early allows for environmental assessment and establishes a reputation for punctuality. Panic caused by rushing is a variable I cannot afford. He took a slow breath, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and slid the door open. The classroom was bathed in morning light. It was mostly empty, save for 2 students who were already engaged in a heated debate near the podium. Don't put your feet on the desk. Huh! It's disrespectful to the UA upperclassmen and the people who made the desk. Like I care. What junior high are you from, you extra? Izuku paused. The variables were familiar. Tenya Ida, the engine-legged boy from the exam. Rigid. Rule-oriented. High-stress personality. Katsuki Bakugo. Volatile. Egocentric. High combat potential. Izuku stepped inside, his footsteps silent on the linoleum. He didn't want to engage. He wanted to find his desk, organize his supplies and observe. But Ida's sensors were apparently tuned to movement. The tall boy spun around. You! Ida adjusted his glasses, marching toward Izuku. You're Midoriya. The one who realized the true nature of the practical exam. Bakugo's head snapped up. His eyes, red and narrowed, locked onto Izuku. The air in the room temperature seemed to drop. I am Tenya Ida from Somei Junior High, Ida announced, extending a hand stiffly. I must apologize. I misjudged you completely. I failed to perceive the hidden test of character, while you deduced it instantly. As a student, you are superior to me. Izuku looked at the hand, then at Ida's face. He values hierarchy and merit. He is correcting his data based on new evidence. A logical ally. I didn't deduce a hidden test, Izuku said calmly. I simply prioritized a civilian life over a score. It was a moral calculus, not an academic one. Midoriya. The growl came from the back. Bakugo was standing up, smoke curling lazily from his palms. How the hell did you get in here, Deku? Bakugo's voice was low, vibrating with suppressed rage. And what's with that arm? Did you finally break yourself? Izuku turned to face him. He didn't flinch. He didn't tremble. He looked at Bakugo with the same detached clinical gaze he used on a math problem. I applied. I took the exam. I passed, Izuku stated. The arm is a temporary structural failure due to exceeding safe output limits. It will heal. Bakugo stepped forward, teeth bared. Don't give me that robot crap. You've been lying to me for years. You said you were quirkless. I did not lie, Izuku said, maintaining eye contact. Circumstances changed. Oh, is that it? A bubbly voice interrupted the tension. Ochako Uraraka appeared in the doorway, beaming. It's the plain-looking boy. You made it. The class began to fill up. The tension between Izuku and Bakugo didn't dissipate, but it was forced into the background as the room became a cacophony of introductions. Izuku moved to his seat, desk 18, and sat down. He opened his bag, placing his notebooks in a neat stack. Class composition. He scanned the room. A distinct lack of overlapping quirk types. A frog mutant. A boy with a tail. A floating uniform. Invisibility? The boy with the split hair color. Ice and fire? If you're just here to make friends, you can pack up your stuff now. The voice came from the floor. The class froze. Lying in the doorway, encased in a bright yellow sleeping bag like a metamorphic caterpillar, was a man. He looked exhausted. His hair was black and unkempt, his eyes bloodshot and dry. He sucked on a pouch of jelly drink with the enthusiasm of a man on life support. He stood up, shedding the sleeping bag. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, the man muttered, checking a stopwatch. Time is limited. You kids are not rational enough. Rational. The word triggered a ping in Izuku's brain. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you. The class erupted in shock. Homeroom teacher? Izuku studied him. Worn utility belt. Scarf made of a unique carbon fiber weave. Goggles around the neck to hide line of sight. This is Eraserhead. Underground hero. Specializes in stealth and capture. He dislikes media and pageantry. A pragmatist. Aizawa reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a stack of blue gym uniforms. Put these on and head out to the grounds, he said, turning his back. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. The changing room was a chaotic mix of boys stripping off buttons and boasting about their powers. I'm Minoru Mineta. A small boy with grape-like balls on his head shouted, drooling slightly. I can't wait to see the girls' uniforms. Izuku ignored him, methodically changing into the blue tracksuit. He tested the fabric stretch. breathable, fire-resistant, good range of motion. Hey, Midoriya, right? A boy with red spiky hair, Kirishima, grinned at him. That was manly how you stood up to Bakugo earlier. Do you guys have history? We attended the same junior high, Izuku said, zipping up his jacket. He seems kinda intense, a boy with elbows shaped like tape dispensers noted. Zero. Kaken has a high drive for victory, Izuku said neutrally. His aggression is a byproduct of his perfectionism. It makes him predictable, but dangerous. The boys exchanged glances. Who talks like that? Izuku finished tying his shoes. He squeezed his right hand, testing the pain levels in his still healing fingers. Manageable. They walked out onto the pea grounds. The sun was high, baking the dirt field. A quirk apprehension test? Uraraka asked, looking worried. But what about the entrance ceremony? The guidance counselor meeting? Aizawa stood with his back to them, slouching. If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. He turned, his dark eyes sweeping over them. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes. He held up a softball. You kids have been doing these since junior high, right? Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The country still uses averages taken from students without quirks. It's not rational. But the Ministry of Education is procrastinating. He pointed at Bakugo. Bakugo, you finished at the top of the practical exam. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? 67 meters, Bakugo scoffed. Then try it with your quirk. Bakugo stepped into the circle. He stretched his arms, a predatory grin spreading across his face. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Bakugo wound up. Dai-ai! Boom! An explosion erupted from his palm, propelling the ball into the stratosphere. A shockwave kicked up dust. Aizawa looked at the device in his hand. He turned it to show the class. 705.2 meters. Whoa! Is this for real? This looks like fun. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Awesome! The excitement rippled through the class. They were high on the freedom of finally being allowed to be special. Izuku stood silent. He watched Aizawa's face. The teacher wasn't smiling. His eyes narrowed as he heard the word fun. Fun, huh? Aizawa whispered. The temperature on the field seemed to drop 10 degrees. You have 3 years to become a hero, Aizawa said softly. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? He grinned. It was a wide, predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential. He brushed his hair back. And will be punished with expulsion. The cheer died instantly. Expulsion? Uraraka shrieked. But it's the first day. That's not fair. Natural disasters, big accidents, and selfish villains, Aizawa droned. Calamities whose time or place can't be predicted. Japan is covered with unfairness. Heroes are the ones who reverse those situations. He stared them down. If you wanted to go talk to your friends at Mickey D's after school, you're too bad. For the next 3 years, you will do all it can to give you one hardship after another. Go beyond. Plus ultra, he beckoned with a finger. Overcome it with all you've got. Izuku watched the class panic. Is he lying? Izuku analyzed the data. UA is a government institution with immense autonomy. Their expulsion records are public but often overlooked. Last year, Aizawa expelled an entire class of first years. Probability of deception, low. Probability of rational culling, high. Izuku looked at his hand. He couldn't use one for all. Not for the sprints. Not for the jumps. If he used it, he would break his body, and then he would be useless for the subsequent tests. If he was useless, he would be last. If he was last, he was gone. Strategy, Izuku thought, his heart rate remaining steady at 60 bpm. Perform at peak human conditioning for tests 1 through 4. Rely on technique and the 10 months of muscle density built at the beach. Save the quirk for the ball throw, where the point-to-damage ratio is highest. Demonstration is over, Aizawa said. The real thing starts now. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ida and Azu the frog girl were up first. Ida clocked a stunning 3.04 seconds. Like a fish in water, Aizawa muttered. Izuku watched. Engine torque requires a build-up. He starts slower but accelerates exponentially. When it was Izuku's turn, he was paired with Bakugo. Don't cry when I leave you in the dust, Deku, Bakugo growled, crouching at the line. Focus on your lane, Izuku replied, staring straight ahead. Start. Explosion. Bakugo launched himself backward with blasts, propelling himself forward. Izuku sprinted. He didn't have propulsion. He had biomechanics. He drove his knees high, arms pumping in perfect synchronization with his breath. He ran not like a middle schooler, but like an athlete who had studied the optimal gait of Olympic sprinters. Bakugo crossed the line, 4.13 seconds. Izuku crossed the line, 7.02 seconds. It was an average time for a high school athlete, perhaps slightly above average. But in a world of superheroes, it was mundane. TCH, Bakugo sneered. Slow. Izuku ignored him, checking his own pulse. Recovery time is good. Next, test 2, grip strength. Izuku took the dynamometer. He squeezed, exhaling sharply to engage his core. 56 kilograms. Whoa! 540 kilograms? Siro yelled, looking at a tall, multi-armed boy named Shoji. You're a gorilla! Izuku looked at his 56. Average. Without enhancement, I am statistically insignificant here. He handed the device back to the machine. Aizawa was watching him. Izuku felt the gaze, heavy, judgmental. The teacher was writing something on a clipboard. He sees a boy without a quirk, Izuku realized. He sees a liability. Test 3, standing long jump. Bakugo flew across the sandbox using explosions. Aoyama, a sparkly boy, used a naval laser to propel himself backward. Izuku stood at the line. No quirk. Just physics. He swung his arms. He jumped. In midair, he tucked his knees to his chest to reduce drag and extend the flight time. He landed in a roll, carrying the momentum forward rather than sticking the landing and jarring his knees, clearing the sandbox. Good form, Ojiro the tailboy noted. Like a parkour runner. Izuku stood up, dusting off his uniform. Better than average. But still not plus ultra. Test 4, repeated sidesteps. Mineta was the king here, using his bouncy balls to rebound back and forth at high speed. Izuku performed strictly standard repetitions. By the time the first 4 tests were done, the hierarchy was becoming clear. The recommended students, Todoroki and Yayorozu, were dominating. Bakugo was close behind. Izuku was hovering near the bottom. Not last, Hagakure, Invisible Girl, and Aoyama were struggling with physical fitness outside of their specific quirks. But he was in the danger zone. I need a high score, Izuku thought. I need to show power. Test 5, ball throw. This was it. Uraraka stepped up. She touched the ball, floated it, and hit it with a bat-like swing. The ball went up, and didn't come down. Infinity. The class cheered. That's crazy. She's amazing. Midoriya, Aizawa called out. The cheering stopped. The class looked at the boy with the plain face and the green hair. The boy who hadn't used the quirk yet. Izuku walked to the circle. Atmospheric conditions, slight wind from the east. Humidity, low. He picked up the ball. It felt heavy. If I use 100% of one for all, I will shatter my arm. If I shatter my arm, I cannot do the remaining 3 test sit-ups, seated toe touch, distance run. If I fail those, my average drops. However, Izuku reasoned, if I don't use the quirk here, I will score less than 50 meters. That guarantees a low ranking. It was a gamble. Sacrifice the arm for a score that puts him in the safety zone? No. All Might said I can modulate it. I just haven't successfully done it yet. Izuku stood in the circle. He closed his eyes. Visualize the egg. Don't let it explode. He drew his arm back. He felt the power rising, a tsunami in his veins. Smash, but gently. He swung. He channeled the power. Smash. The ball left his hand. It flew. 46 meters. Izuku stood frozen. His arm didn't hurt. But the ball, it just dropped. The power had vanished the instant before release. I tried to use it. Izuku whispered, staring at his hand. I erased your quirk. The voice was dry and irritated. Izuku turned. Aizawa stood there. His hair was floating, defying gravity. His goggles were gone, revealing eyes that glowed a terrifying red. The scarf around his neck seemed to writhe like a living thing. That entrance exam was definitely not rational enough, Aizawa said, his voice dripping with disdain. Even a kid like you was accepted. You erased it. Izuku analyzed, his brain clicking into overdrive even in the face of hostility. Those goggles, the hair. You're the erasure hero, Eraserhead. Eraser? Never heard of him, some students muttered. I saw it, Aizawa continued, ignoring the class. He stepped closer, the scarf lashing out to wrap around Izuku, pulling him in. They were face to face. Aizawa smelled of eye drops and coffee. From what I can tell, you can't control your quirk, can you? Aizawa hissed. Do you intend to become incapacitated again and have someone save you? That is not my intention, Izuku replied. His voice was steady, though the scarf was tight. Whatever your intention, the result is the same, Aizawa said coldly. During the exam, you saved that girl, yes. But you shattered yourself to do it. You were useless afterwards. Aizawa leaned in. There is a story about a hero who saved 1,000 people by himself during a disaster. You have his bravery, but you are simply a liability. The red eyes bore into Izuku's soul. Midoriya Izuku. You cannot become a hero with that power. Aizawa blinked. His hair fell. The pressure vanished. I've returned your quirk, Aizawa said, turning away and walking back to the safe zone. You have 2 throws left. Hurry up and get it over with. Izuku stood alone in the circle. The verdict was in. The teacher had deemed him defective. He told him off, Bakugo muttered, watching with a dark satisfaction. Is he okay? Uraraka asked, worried. Izuku looked at the ball. He's right, Izuku thought. Logically, he is correct. A hero who fires one shot and collapses is a burden on the logistics of a rescue operation. He picked up the ball again. I need to prove that I am not a liability. I need to show I can manage the risk. He looked at Aizawa. The teacher was pouring eye drops into his dry eyes. He expects me to give up. Or to break my arm again in a desperate attempt to prove him wrong. Izuku closed his eyes. He centered his breathing zone. The world narrowed down to the ball, his arm, and his finger. If I use the power in my whole arm, it breaks. The backlash is distributed across the bone structure, but physics suggests that force applied at the very last moment of the kinetic chain yields the highest velocity. Izuku opened his eyes. They were frighteningly clear. He wound up. His form was perfect, hips rotating, shoulder driving, elbow leading. He didn't activate the power. Not yet. He threw. At the very instant the ball was leaving his fingertips, the final millisecond of contact, Izuku engaged one for all. Focus everything into the tip of the index finger. Snap. The sound was like a gunshot. The air pressure exploded from his fingertip. The ball vanished, blasted into the sky with a force that created a visible updraft of dust. Izuku didn't scream. He winced, a sharp intake of breath through his teeth. He watched the ball soar. Trajectory optimal. The device in Aizawa's hand beeped. 705.3 meters. Aizawa's eyes widened. He looked from the screen to the boy. Izuku stood in the circle. His right index finger was purple, swollen, and clearly broken. The rest of his hand, his arm, his body unharmed. Izuku reached into his pocket and pulled out a small roll of white athletic tape. He began to wrap the broken finger, binding it to his middle finger for support. His movements were efficient, practiced. He turned to Aizawa. He raised his fist, showing the taped finger. He was sweating, his face pale from the pain, but his expression was resolute. I can still move, sensei. The silence in the yard was absolute. Aizawa stared at him. The corner of his mouth twitched. He minimized the damage. He realized he couldn't control the output, so he controlled the area of effect. He calculated the trade-off between injury and result. Ho! Aizawa grinned. It was a terrifying look. This kid. DKU. The scream shattered the moment. Bakugo was sprinting. Explosions popped in his hands. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. What the hell was that? Bakugo roared. Tell me what's going on, you bastard! You were quirkless. He was fast. He was going to kill him. Izuku didn't run. He shifted his stance. He dropped his center of gravity. He prepared to use the Tomonage judo throw he had practiced in his room 1,000 times. Target is blinded by rage. Center of mass is forward. If I duck and pivot. Suddenly, the scarf wrapped around Bakugo. Gah! Bakugo choked, his explosions dying out. These are weapons made of carbon fiber woven with metal wire of a special alloy, Aizawa muttered, holding the scarf tight. Geez, stop making me use my quirk over and over. I have dry eye. You're wasting time, Aizawa said, releasing Bakugo. Prepare for the next event. Bakugo stood there, panting, staring at Izuku. Izuku stared back, his eyes cool and analytical. He feels threatened, Izuku realized. His worldview is predicated on my inferiority. By disrupting that axiom, I have destabilized his entire psychological framework. We're not done, Bakugo hissed, turning away. The rest of the tests passed in a blur. Izuku performed the sit-ups and toe touches with grim determination. His finger throbbed, a steady drumbeat of pain, but he compartmentalized it. Pain is data. Ignore. Finally, the sun began to set. The class gathered around Aizawa. Okay, I'll quickly tell you the results, Aizawa said. The total is simply the marks you got from each test. It's a waste of time to explain verbally, so I'll show you. He pressed a button. A hologram appeared. Izuku held his breath. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 18. Toru Hagakure. 19. Minoru Mineta. 20. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku stared at the number 20. It was over. He had failed. Even with the ball throw, his poor performance in the sprints, and his lack of a quirk for the other tests had dragged him down. The calm finally cracked. A cold dread seeped into his chest. I analyzed. I optimized. I endured. And it wasn't enough. He looked at his hands. I'm sorry, All Might. By the way, Aizawa said, turning off the hologram. I was lying about the expulsion. The class froze. It was a logical ruse to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. Silence. Hoa? The class screamed in unison. Of course it was a lie. Yaoyorozu sighed, hand on her chest. It should have been obvious if you thought it through. That was a little nerve-wracking, huh? Zero laughed nervously. I'll take up the challenge any time. Kirishima grinned. Izuku stood there, the dread slowly receding, replaced by a new calculation. A logical ruse? He looked at Aizawa. The teacher was walking away. No, Izuku thought. That wasn't a lie. The pressure he exerted was genuine. If we had shown lack of potential, he would have cut us. Midoriya, Aizawa said, pausing. Go to the nurse's office and have that old lady fix your finger. Tomorrow will be even harder. Aizawa glanced back over his shoulder. Don't think you're safe just because you survived today. I'm watching you. Izuku straightened his back. Yes, sensei. Outside the school gates, the sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. Izuku walked out, his finger healed mostly but exhausted from Recovery Girl's quirk. Midoriya! Ida caught up to him. That was quite the ordeal. Aizawa-sensei is certainly deceptive. But I suppose that is necessary for you, eh? Hey! Wait for me. Uraraka ran up, panting. You two are fast. Walking to the station? Yes, Ida said. You were amazing today, Midoriya. Uraraka beamed. That finger flick. Pow! I was so scared you were gonna get expelled. I calculated the risk, Izuku said quietly. Aizawa-sensei tests us by putting us in crisis. It's sufficient. You're always so calm, Uraraka said, tilting her head. Even when Bakugo was yelling, you were just like stone cold. It's cool. Like a pro, Izuku blinked. Cool? Me? I'm Deku, he blurted out, the old nickname slipping. Deku? Uraraka asked. Like, you can do it, Deku? No, it means useless wood puppet, Ida corrected helpfully. But I like it. Uraraka smiled. It sounds like Dikairu. You can do it. Izuku looked at her. He looked at the sunset. The calm analyst in his brain noted, rebranding of derogatory nickname. Positive association formed. Morale increased. But the boy in his heart just felt warm. Deku, Izuku said, testing the word. I like it. Corner Street. All Might watched from behind a wall. He saw the 3 students walking away, laughing. He passed, All Might whispered. Barely. But he passed. He's a strange one. Aizawa's voice came from behind him. All Might jumped. Aizawa! I was planning to expel him, Aizawa said, leaning against the wall. He has 0 control over his power. Normally, that's a death sentence. But he thinks, Aizawa said. He tapped his temple. Most kids with power like that just blast away. This kid, he dissected the problem. He accepted the injury as a cost of doing business. That kind of cold rationality, it's rare. Aizawa smirked. He reminds me of you, but without the smile. Or maybe, he reminds me of me. Aizawa walked away. He has potential. Let's see if he survives the week. All Might looked back at Izuku's retreating figure. You're doing it, young Midoriya. You're finding your own way. A way of the mind, as well as the fist. The eye of the storm had officially entered UA High. The locker room smelled of fresh rubber and anticipation. It was the scent of transformation. Izuku Midoriya stood before the mirror, adjusting the respirator mask around his neck. The costume was green. Very green. His mother had made it based on his sketches, the long ears, the jumpsuit, and while part of him felt a twinge of embarrassment at the bunny aesthetic, the analytical part of his brain appreciated the sturdy, fire-resistant fabric. He tightened the red utility belt. It was heavier than the standard issue. He had requested extra pouches. Inside were not gadgets, but tools, flashlights, wire cutters, a small mirror on a telescoping stick, basic first aid supplies, and 3 rolls of capture tape. Midoriya, man, that suit looks cool. Very retro. Kirishima shouted from across the room, flexing his bare chest where his gear exposed his rock-hard skin. Check mine out. Simple and manly, it exposes your vital organs, Izuku noted, his voice muffled slightly as he checked the seal on his gloves. However, given your hardening quirk, minimizing fabric restriction to allow for maximum dermal hardening is a logical trade-off. It prioritizes mobility over redundant armor. Kirishima blinked then grinned. Yeah? Exactly. You get it. In the corner, Katsuki Bakugo was slamming his locker shut. He wore black tank top, baggy pants, and massive, grenade-shaped gauntlets. He didn't look at anyone. He was vibrating with a dark, kinetic energy. Izuku watched him through the reflection of the mirror, pulse rate elevated. Shoulders hunched. He is already in a combat state. He isn't here to learn, he is here to dominate. Izuku closed his eyes. Inhale, 4 seconds. Hold 4 seconds. Exhale, 4 seconds. The anxiety, the trembling fear of facing his childhood tormentor, was filed away. He opened his eyes. They were clear, cold, and ready. Ground Beta Monitoring Room. Hero Basic Training. All Might's voice boomed, echoing off the concrete walls of the underground bunker. Combat is not just about punching villains. It is about responding to crises. Today, we simulate an indoor hostage situation. The class stood in their costumes, a colorful array of heroes in training. You look cool, Deku. Izuku turned. Ochako Uraraka was walking toward him. She wore a tight, pink and black suit with large wrist gauntlets and boots. She was tugging at the fabric, her face flushed. I should have been more specific with my design requests, she lamented. It's so skin-tight. It's embarrassing. Izuku scanned the suit. He didn't blush. He didn't stammer. His mind instantly deconstructed the design. It's designed to stimulate your pressure points, Izuku said, pointing to the black markings on her wrists and neck. Your quirk affects your inner ear and causes nausea. The pressure likely helps mitigate motion sickness by regulating blood flow. It is a medical necessity, not an aesthetic choice. You shouldn't be embarrassed by efficiency. Uraraka blinked, her hands stopping their fidgeting. She stared at him, then a wide smile broke across her face. Wow, you really see everything, don't you? Thanks, Deku. I feel a lot better about it now. Alright, listen up. All Might held up a box. We will determine teams by lottery. The lots were drawn. Team A, Izuku Midoriya Ochako Uraraka Heroes. Team D, Katsuki Bakugo Tenya Ida villains. The moment the names were called, the air in the room changed. Bakugo turned slowly. His eyes locked onto Izuku. It wasn't a look of anger. It was the look of a predator who had just been locked in a cage with its favorite meal. Its fate, Bakugo whispered, a cruel grin stretching his face. Ida adjusted his glasses, looking serious. A confrontation between classmates. How tragic. But I will not hold back. Izuku didn't return Bakugo's glare. He was looking at the building blueprints All Might had projected on the screen. 5 stories. Reinforced concrete. Multiple entry points. The villain team has a 5-minute head start to fortify. Young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice dropping the persona for a brief second as he passed by. Are you ready? Izuku looked up. I have calculated the variables. I am ready. All Might looked at the boy's eyes. There was no fear. Just a terrifyingly calm resolve. It unnerved the number 1 hero, just a little. The infiltration. The building was silent. The only sound was the wind whistling through the open windows of the fake city. Izuku and Uraraka crouched outside a first-floor window. Okay, Uraraka whispered, looking nervous. What's the plan? Do we just rush in? Izuku shook his head. He tapped his ear, indicating the comms unit. No. That maximizes the probability of an ambush. Bakugo will not play the objective. He will hunt me. Hunt you? Uraraka paled. But isn't that bad? It is irrational, Izuku corrected. But predictable. He will leave the bomb unprotected or lightly guarded to seek a confrontation. Ida is rule-abiding. He will stay with the weapon. This creates a split in their forces. Izuku pulled a folded piece of paper from his belt, a rough sketch of the interior he had memorized. I will act as a decoy, Izuku stated flatly. I will draw Bakugo's fire in the lower levels. While he is distracted, you will use your quirk to float up the exterior and enter from the 5th floor window. You will secure the weapon while I occupy the primary threat. But, can you handle Bakugo alone? Uraraka asked, gripping his arm. He looked really scary. Izuku looked at her hand, then at her eyes. I don't need to defeat him. I just need to waste his time. Fear is a variable he relies on. If I remove it, his combat effectiveness drops. Team A, enter. All Might's voice crackled in their earpieces. Go, Izuku whispered. Uraraka nodded and ran toward the side of the building. Izuku climbed through the window. Inside, the hallway was dark. Concrete pillars lined the corridor. Izuku walked softly, his boots making no sound. He regulated his breathing. Heart rate, 65 BPM. Adrenaline suppressed. Senses, maximum gain. He didn't walk down the center. He hugged the walls, checking corners with the small mirror on his stick. 2nd floor corridor. He stopped. The air shifted. A subtle change in pressure. A faint smell of nitroglycerin, sweet and burnt. He's here. Izuku didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He simply stopped walking and shifted his weight to the balls of his feet. I know you're there, Deku. Bakugo stepped out from behind a pillar 10 meters ahead. He wasn't yelling yet. He was smiling, small explosions popping in his hands like firecrackers. I've been waiting for this, Bakugo said, his voice trembling with suppressed violence. Aizawa's not here to wrap me in cloth. No teachers. Just us. Izuku lowered the mirror. He stood straight, hands hanging loose at his sides. He didn't take a fighting stance. Where is the weapon, Kaken? Izuku asked. His voice was monotone. Forget the weapon. Bakugo roared, lunging forward. The only objective is crushing you. Bakugo closed the distance in a second. He led with his right hand, a wide, sweeping hook aimed at Izuku's face, propelled by an explosion. Right swing. Wide arc, excessive telegraphing due to anger. In canon, Izuku would have screamed. He would have flinched. Here, Izuku watched the muscles in Bakugo's shoulder contract. He calculated the trajectory. He didn't retreat. He stepped in. As Bakugo's arm swung around, Izuku ducked under the blast radius. The heat singed his green hair, but he didn't blink. He grabbed Bakugo's outstretched right arm with both hands, one on the wrist, one on the tricep. Leverage. Using Bakugo's own forward momentum, Izuku pivoted his hips. He executed a flawless nage, a shoulder throw. Bakugo's feet left the ground. The world flipped. Wham! Bakugo slammed back first onto the concrete floor. The air left his lungs in a wheeze. Izuku didn't stop. He didn't gloat. He immediately backed away 5 meters, putting distance between them. You always lead with a right hook when you start a fight, Izuku said calmly, adjusting his gloves. It's a bad habit. You should correct it. Bakugo lay on the floor for a second, staring at the ceiling. His brain couldn't process it. Deku didn't stutter. Deku didn't cower. Deku had just thrown him. You! Bakugo scrambled to his feet. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated to pinpricks. The veins in his neck bulged. You damn nerd! Observation room. The class gasped. Did you see that? Kirishima yelled. He just flipped Bakugo like a pancake. His reaction time was incredible, Yayorozu noted, her hand on her chin. He didn't use a quirk. That was pure martial arts. He used his opponent's force against him. But Bakugo looks really mad now, Kaminari said, wincing. All Might gripped the podium. Young Midoriya, you aren't fighting with power. You're fighting with information. The duel. Bakugo wasn't thinking anymore. He was a ball of instinct and rage. Die. He launched another explosion, this time a direct blast. Izuku rolled to the left. The concrete wall where he had been standing was scorched black. Uraraka, Izuku spoke into his comms. His voice was steady, contrasting sharply with the explosions echoing around him. Status? I'm at the 4th floor. Uraraka's voice came back, breathless. I hear explosions. Are you okay? Proceed to the objective, Izuku said, ducking under a kick. I am engaging the primary threat. Do not come down. Bakugo heard him talking. It infuriated him. Don't ignore me. Bakugo fired a rapid volley. Left, right, left. Izuku danced. That was the only word for it. He wasn't faster than Bakugo physically, but he was moving before Bakugo fired. He watched the eyes. He watched the shoulders. Blast to the left. Izuku sidestepped right. Kick to the gut. Izuku parried with his forearm guard. Grapple attempt. Izuku slapped the hand away. It was eerie. Izuku was silent. He breathed rhythmically through his nose. He looked at Bakugo not as a rival, but as a malfunctioning machine that needed to be dismantled. Why won't you fight back? Bakugo screamed, panting heavily. He was burning stamina. Sweat poured down his face. Use your quirk. Use that trick you did at the ball throw. Are you looking down on me? Izuku stopped. He stood across the hallway, safe for a moment. I am not looking down on you, Izuku said. I am assessing the situation. Using my quirk at close range carries a 40% risk of structural damage to the building and a 90% risk of permanent injury to you. It is illogical. Illogical? Bakugo's voice cracked. You think I'm weak? You think I'll break? Yes, Izuku said simply. The word hung in the air. It was worse than any insult. It was worse than any punch. Izuku Midoriya, the pebble, the useless Deku, was looking at Katsuki Bakugo with concern. With pity, something inside Bakugo snapped. He stopped moving. He stood up straight. He raised his right arm, pointing the massive gauntlet at Izuku. Young Bakugo. All Might's voice cut over the loudspeakers. Stop. Are you trying to kill him? He won't die if he dodges. Bakugo screamed back at the ceiling. He reached for the pin on the gauntlet. Izuku's eyes narrowed. Grenadier bracer. Storage mechanism for nitroglycerin sweat. Pulling the pin releases the stored fluid in a focused directional blast. Calculated yield, severe. Lethal at this range in a confined corridor. Izuku didn't run. He couldn't outrun the blast radius. Option 1 dodge. Result failure. The hallway funnels the blast. Option 2 shield. Result failure. No defensive quirk. Option 3 disrupt. Izuku dropped into a crouch. He clenched his right fist. He felt one for all humming, waiting. 5% output. Full call right arm only. Bakugo pulled the pin. Boom. The explosion was blinding. A torrent of fire and force roared down the hallway, disintegrating the floor tiles and shattering the windows. But Izuku wasn't there. A fraction of a second before the blast fired, Izuku had leaped, not away, but up. He punched the ceiling. Smash! It was a whisper. The concrete ceiling above him shattered instantly under the force of one for all. Izuku shot through the hole into the third floor just as the firestorm consumed the corridor below. The floor beneath him, the ceiling of the second floor crumbled, dumping tons of debris into the hallway, creating a barrier between him and Bakugo. Izuku rolled onto the third floor tiles, clutching his right arm. It wasn't broken, he had controlled the output better this time, but the muscles were screaming, and his sleeve was shredded. Uraraka, Izuku gasped into the comms. Bakugo has deployed heavy ordnance. The building integrity is compromised. Be careful, Deku. That shook the whole building. Did he get you? Negative, Izuku said, standing up. He missed. But he has escalated the engagement. I am moving to end this. The hunt. Down on the second floor, the smoke cleared. Bakugo stared at the hole in the ceiling. He ran. Bakugo whispered. His hands were shaking. He ran away. Where are you going, coward? Bakugo blasted himself up through the hole, landing on the third floor. He looked around. Empty. A maze of pillars and shadows. Come out! Bakugo yelled. Stop hiding and fight me! Silence. Then, a voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. You're loud, Kaken. Bakugo spun around. Where are you? You're giving away your position, the voice continued calmly. You're wasting oxygen. You're overheating. Shut up. Bakugo fired blindly into the shadows. You're not fighting a villain. Izuku's voice drifted from behind a pillar. You're fighting your own ego. Bakugo charged the pillar. He blasted it to dust. Nothing. Izuku was gone. It was psychological warfare. Izuku knew Bakugo better than anyone. He knew that silence and invisibility terrified Bakugo more than any monster. Bakugo needed acknowledgement. He needed to be seen. By denying him a target, Izuku was dismantling him. Up in the observation room, the students were silent. This is... Tsuyu Ajui put a finger to her chin. Scary. Midoriya is hunting him. It's a valid strategy, Aizawa, who had snuck into the back of the room, muttered. Turn the opponent's aggression into fatigue. Frustrate them until they make a mistake. The trap. Bakugo was panting. He was drenched in sweat. His eyes darted around wildly. Found you. He saw a flash of green tape behind a crate. Bakugo lunged, firing a blast. The crate exploded. It was just a strip of capture tape stuck to a box. A decoy. Behind you, Izuku whispered. Bakugo spun, swinging a backhand explosion. Izuku was there. He ducked the swing. But this time, he didn't retreat. He stepped into Bakugo's guard. Close quarters combat. Bakugo tried to bring his other gauntlet around. Izuku jammed his elbow into the joint of Bakugo's armor, stopping the movement mechanically. Let go! Bakugo screamed. Capture tape, Izuku noted. In his left hand, Izuku held the roll of white tape. With a fluid motion, he wrapped it around Bakugo's right leg. What? Izuku yanked the tape. Bakugo tripped, his balance already compromised by his wild swing. As Bakugo fell, he fired an explosion at the ground to propel himself back up. He spun in the air, a whirlwind of fire. I won't lose to you. Izuku watched the spin. He's using centrifugal force. The payload will be heavy. Izuku took a breath. He couldn't dodge this one. The area of effect was too large. Accept damage to secure victory. Izuku crossed his arms over his face. He channeled 5% into his forearms to reinforce his defense. The explosion hit. It felt like being hit by a car. Izuku was blasted backward, skidding across the floor. His sleeves burned away. His skin was seared red. He hit a wall with a sickening crunch. Gotcha! Bakugo landed, grinning like a maniac. He raised his hand for the finishing blow. But Izuku wasn't looking at him. Izuku was looking at the ceiling. Now Uraraka! Izuku yelled. What? Bakugo paused. Crash. The ceiling above them exploded downward. While Izuku had been distracting Bakugo, Uraraka had been busy. She had touched every piece of loose debris on the floor above, the rubble from Izuku's earlier smash, and floated it. When Izuku gave the signal, she released it. Tons of concrete rained down. Bakugo looked up, eyes wide. He fired upward, blasting the rocks apart, but the sheer volume was too much. The dust cloud was instant and blinding. Damn it! I can't see! Bakugo coughed, waving his arms. Out of the dust, a shadow moved, silent. Fast. Bakugo swung blindly. He hit air. He felt a hand grip his gauntlet. Then, the sound of tearing tape. Zzzzzt. The dust settled. Bakugo stood frozen. Wrapped tightly around his right gauntlet, and loop-locked to his belt, was the white capture tape. In the Yuri rulebook, wrapping a specific limb, or the whole body constituted a capture. Izuku stood in front of him. He was battered. His uniform was scorched, his skin red and blistering. He was breathing heavily, clutching his bruised ribs. But his eyes. Those damn eyes. They were still calm. Capture complete, Izuku wheezed. What? Bakugo stared at the tape. No. I wasn't. Hero team wins. All Might's voice announced. On the monitor, everyone saw the split screen. While Bakugo was staring at the tape, the other camera showed Uraraka hugging the papier-mâché bomb on the 5th floor. Ida was tied up, floating helplessly near the ceiling. How? Bakugo trembled. Ida, I told you, Izuku said softly. You forgot the objective. Bakugo looked at Izuku. He waited for the mockery. He waited for the gloating. Izuku reached into his pouch and pulled out a small burn ointment. He didn't use it on himself. He held it out to Bakugo. You burned your wrist with that last blast, Izuku said. Your sweat glands were overactive. You should cool it down. Bakugo slapped the ointment away. Don't. Bakugo choked out. Don't pity me, you bastard. It's not pity, Izuku said, watching the tube roll across the floor. It's damage control. The aftermath. The review session was brutal. Ida was despondent. Bakugo was catatonic. Izuku was being bandaged by a robot in the corner. Well, All Might stood at the podium. Who was the MVP of this battle? It was Ida, Momo Yaoyorozu said, raising her hand. Eh? Uraraka blinked. But we won? Ida was the only one who adapted fully to the role, Momo explained, her voice crisp and analytical. He prepared the stronghold. He stayed on objective. Bakugo acted on personal grudges and abandoned the mission. Uraraka let her guard down mid-battle. And Midoriya. She looked at Izuku. Midoriya's strategy was sound, but reckless. He sustained significant damage. However, she paused. His psychological management of the battlefield was professional level. He dismantled Bakugo's coordination without overpowering him physically. He controlled the flow of information. He sacrificed himself to ensure the objective was met. It was terrifyingly efficient. All Might nodded. Correct. Though young Midoriya should take better care of his body. After class, the students filed out. Bakugo stood at the school gate. He was staring at the ground. Kaken. Bakugo stiffened. He turned to see Izuku walking toward him. Izuku had a bandage on his cheek and his arm in a sling again. You have a quirk, Bakugo said. His voice was hollow. You tricked me. I didn't trick you, Izuku said. I got it recently. I can't control it well yet. That's why I didn't use it on you. You beat me without it, Bakugo spat. That makes it worse. Tears welled up in Bakugo's eyes. He wiped them furiously. I lost. To you. To the nerd. To Deku. He screamed, his voice cracking. But this is just the start. I won't lose again. I'll be number one. I'll crush you and that ice guy and everyone else. He turned to run but stopped. And stop looking at me like you're analyzing me. I'm not a damn puzzle. Bakugo ran off into the sunset, his pride shattered but his drive ignited. Izuku watched him go. Midoriya? All Might stepped out from the shadows. That was intense. He's strong, Izuku said quietly. His combat instincts are sharper than mine. If he learns to think before he shoots, he will be unstoppable. And you? All Might asked. How do you feel? Izuku looked at his hand. He clenched it into a fist. I felt in control, Izuku admitted. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to him. I was directing him. But, he touched his chest. It felt cold. I didn't feel the heat of the battle. Is that okay? All might put a hand on his shoulder. A cool head saves lives, Izuku. But a warm heart saves souls. You have the head. We just need to make sure the heart doesn't freeze over. Izuku nodded. I understand. He walked home under the stars. The noise in his head was quieter now. The fear was still there, lurking, but he knew how to silence it. He knew how to be the eye of the storm. But as he walked, he couldn't help but wonder if, in the silence, he was losing something else. Something human, variable for future analysis, he thought, and turned the corner toward home.